Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now we've settled into 2022, I want to get serious. I want to talk about an incredibly serious subject that impacts every single one of us. And that is data privacy and online privacy. So I want to explore the threats to consumer data privacy, what we can expect to dominate headlines this year. And by that, everything from malware via USB ports to voice assistant infiltration and so many apps and websites selling your personal data. And especially considering Life360 was caught selling location data of users, including children under 13. I think it highlights the need for helicopter parents to become more privacy parents. So Marco Bellin from Datacappy lives and breathes in this space, and he's rapidly becoming my go-to guy for all things privacy related, and he is a great guy too. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to New York, where Marco is waiting to speak with us now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Marco Bellin, and I am the CEO of a company called BlindCut. We have several privacy products. We are privacy focused. We have a VPN and a private browser called Datacappy. We have a children's search engine called Seekadoo. And we also publish a educational website for parents, caregivers, and grandparents to try and let them know what's going on the internet with their kids and privacy and other things they should be aware of, called privacyparent.com. We're trying to provide not only information about what's going on, but solutions to the problems that we're illuminating.
Love that. And I'd love to take you back, before we dig any deeper into this, I'd love to take you back to where it all began. Can you remember your origin story, what lit that spark for you, and how data privacy got on your radar, and why you decided to go out there and build this product? I feel there's got to be a story there.
There is. Quite honestly, I worked in biotech in the early 90s, and because we were using the internet before a lot of people, I had some experience with what was going on. And I started blocking tracking cookies very early on in the late 90s. And I was always concerned about tracking and people collecting my information. Cut to about 2010, 2012, I started doing a little more research into VPNs and looking into privacy. And I kept coming across VPNs that had a skull and crossbones or something nefarious looking that was go search the dark web or do something illegal and don't get caught type thing. And I was thinking, wow, when you're using a VPN, you're trading your trust from your initial service provider to the VPN. And none of these businesses seem trustworthy. All of a sudden, you're like looking at these sites and saying, wow, these guys are purporting, allowing you to do things that aren't necessarily above board. And what are they actually doing with your information while you're doing it? So I thought to myself that there needed to be a company that was trustworthy, that provided these services. And around 2014, my children were going to school full time, and I had been trading from home. And I realized I wanted to re-engage in the workforce and start working with people again. So I was looking to start a business. I had come up with an idea after watching an old 1970s movie called The China Syndrome, about how to create an app that would allow people to send photographs without the ability for the receiver to take a screenshot of it and then use it for some bad purpose. I looked into that, and I was going to try and have pixels flash on and off so the photograph was never completely fully on the screen, and you could do that so quickly that the eye didn't notice. It ended up that Sony had the patent on that, and I didn't want to really pursue it. So realizing that there was this dearth in trustworthy VPNs, I decided that should be an interesting business to explore. There weren't that many out there. Privacy was starting to get on people's radar. I started to explore VPN. I partnered with a gentleman, brilliant man, who helped me build the VPN. And while we were doing that, I realized that the VPN wasn't the way that you needed to protect your privacy, because of your ISP and your IP address, is one way people track you, but it was also through your browser. So in order to provide an honest privacy product, we felt that we had to build a browser and a VPN. And I made a complete blunder because I wanted to tell the most truth I could. So we coupled the VPN with the browser, forcing people to use our browser with our VPN as opposed to allowing them to use their browser and our VPN independently. That was a complete flop. We totally misread what people's habits were and how they were going to engage with the internet. And that product completely failed. So during that time, we were also building our kids search engine called Seekadoo. So that was a little bit of our focus. After we were finished with that, we decided to uncouple the VPN and the browser so we could offer them independently so people could use the VPN without our browser or use them in tandem. And cut to 2020, we launch. We have very great products. Our VPN uses a sophisticated encryption process called WireGuard. It's very different from other VPNs in the sense that we block ads, we block trackers on the server side so they never get to your devices. We also don't have a login process. All you have to do is download our app from one of the stores, pay the stores, and it works immediately. You also have a test period as well. But so we don't know who our users are. So we only have a device ID. So there's no real identification who our users are. So we have no understanding of who they are. Not necessarily we don't want to know who they are. We care about protecting their privacy, but we don't want to know who our users are. So we have a very strong, sophisticated privacy service. And we're in the alpha stage of building a chat app as well, because that's one of the next places where privacy is important to protect. Once we get into the beta version, hopefully some of your users will join into our test and hopefully make a product that's really great. So that's where we are. That's how we got to where we are. And that's my story.
For people that are using a VPN already, is there anything else that you would say about Datacappy that makes it different from other VPNs on the market?
Yeah, one of the important features that we don't. So most people right now I don't know about most, but many people right now are using VPNs to circumvent geolocation restrictions for streaming services. Right now, that is illegal. So if you're trying to watch Friends from the United States using Netflix and using a VPN to watch it from England, it's not actually a VPN, it's a proxy service. So that actually just changes your IP address and it doesn't encrypt your information. So say you're watching Friends on your VPN in a coffee shop and all of a sudden you decide you want to do some banking. Now you think you're on a VPN, but you're not, and your information is now exposed. So we don't provide a proxy service because we're trying to reach the unsophisticated user and we don't want to confuse them and give them the illusion of some of the privacy features that encryption provides that a proxy doesn't. In that sense, we might not get the audience we want, but we're also protecting people who aren't as sophisticated as some other users to understand what's actually going on.
And is there anything you think we should have learned from last year about personal data privacy? Because it's the beginning of a new year. Everyone's optimistic on how we can change things for the better, etc. Are there any big personal privacy data issues that you think we should have learned and what we can do to improve this year?
I think 2021 was an eye-opener for everybody in terms of how much of their data is actually exposed and collected. People are receiving ads for esoteric things that shouldn't be on a search engine's radar or a Facebook feed or wherever you might receive your ads. And I think they're becoming more aware that even sometimes when they're chatting with their friends about products, all of a sudden they're receiving text messages for those products. And the awareness is there. My biggest concern is that right now, the discussion isn't around privacy, but it's very much focused on social media. And that's taking up all the oxygen right now. Social media has been divisive and detrimental in many ways. And it is the main focus of what people are talking about in terms of the ills of the internet. And the privacy discussion is really an undercurrent. And my fear is that the social media focus is going to drown out the privacy discussion. And even though people are aware of what's going on, they're not going to be informed about solutions that they can use to protect themselves. And so what we should learn from 2021 is that there are a lot of businesses and companies and other groups that are collecting information about you, and not only collecting it, but analyzing it. They're using artificial intelligence to learn about you. And people have to start to be concerned about what that means for us and for our future. I think that, what we should have taken away from 2021 is our data is very much important, and it's being collected in ways we don't even understand.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And how do we apply to that what you predict will be the biggest threats to our personal privacy this year in 2022? Because there are increasing concerns around everything from facial recognition to ANPR system to AI and police, etc. There's just so much going on there. But is there anything you can add to that?
The AI is a huge concern. Machine learning is becoming ubiquitous in all facets of business, and people don't understand what AI is and what it's going to mean to the future. It's the other part of AI that people aren't grasping is that neural network chips are now being put into all our devices. So NVIDIA and all the big chip companies are now building machine learning chips and putting them in our devices. So we are now actively participating in the collection and analyzation of our information just on our daily habits, wherever we go, whoever we talk to. Anything we do with our phone will be soon. It's already in Google, but Apple is now including these chips. And the irony is these chips actually are slower than the processing chips that you would want for speed. You're still going to have on your phones, but not the speed that you could have had. And these chips are now, you can have as much privacy as you want through websites declining cookies and other things. But when your device starts to learn about you, that is where it starts to get scary for me. And not just your devices, but the cross connection of all the devices. So if you take something like the Apple AirTags as an example, the way the Apple AirTags works is through Bluetooth technology. It's not through GPS. Say you put an AirTag on your dog and your dog wanders off, and you find your dog through the app, not through GPS location, but through Bluetooth. So what the AirTag does is it talks to all the other Apple devices around and says, here's this AirTag. And so that means all these other Apple devices are now interconnected. Your Apple device is now talking to other people's Apple devices. So now it knows who you're near, what you're doing. All these things are starting to get a little scary. And, it was unfortunate that BlackBerry went out of business today because they were one of the last bastions of actually using a private phone. Now they're using an Android platform, which I'm not 100% sure about. But yeah, I would love us to be able to provide some type of phone service that was actually private. I think people have to start to be aware and start to look for businesses that are trying to actually provide private services and aren't circumventing their own needs and saying that they're privacy concerned when they're not. The Google and Apple wars right now over your personal data is insane. Apple is actively trying to prevent Google from collecting information on you, not because they want to protect your privacy, but because they want that information for themselves. The same is for Google, the same is for Amazon, the same is for Facebook. All these huge companies are collecting information about you left and right. And they're such behemoths that there's almost nothing we can do about it. You can use my VPN, you can use our private browser that will give you some protection, but we do need to have a community and a group of people that will start to protect your privacy in a much more cohesive way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I saw something on BBC Click. If I can find the video, I'll put it in the show notes for people to check out. But it gave a scenario that was happening I think it was in China. I'm not 100% on that. I would need to look it up. But it was showing that CCTV cameras were picking people up as they left their home. Facial recognition could identify them. And then from the moment they got into their ride sharing, using a ride sharing app, they got a ride to a coffee shop. And from there, the facial recognition picked them up again. And when the person left the coffee shop, they got a text message from the government saying, you've had a drink with a known protester today, or someone that's protested against the government. We'd advise you against doing it in the future. It sounds incredibly dystopian and scary, but that technology was already there and happening and doing that last year. And it's very worrying, isn't it?
I actually coincidentally had just posted today, which is January 3rd or January 4th, sorry, an article about the Sesame Score in China.
Yeah.
So the Chinese government, it's actually through Alibaba, uses a score to track their citizens. And this score is based on their affirmative posts about the government, their engagement, as you said, with certain individuals. Actually, they track how many times a week you visit your parents. And the higher your Sesame Score, the more likely you are to be able to get a government job, to be able to fly in an airplane, to be able to use a train. If your Sesame Score is low in China, you do not have access to public transportation. You can't fly on an airplane. You don't have access to to government jobs. These things are, as you said, dystopian, and it's potentially the future Big Brother analysis of everybody. People don't really realize in the Western world that these things are actually happening behind the scenes as well. There's a company called Sift.com that basically tracks everybody everywhere, their credit card purchases, their website visits, and their purpose is, in theory, to validate who you are. So when you're making a purchase, your credit card company doesn't have to worry about who it is. But these companies have such detailed dossiers on you that it's terrifying, and you don't even know they exist. And these companies actually create their own scores, and they affect your ability to get loans, to get jobs. And the fact that nobody knows that they exist is truly problematic.
Yeah. There's another one. I think it's Clearview AI. They hoovered up everyone's images that they tagged themselves with online that were open and publicly available, and then started selling those same images that were tagged, etc., to law enforcement agencies. And I think there's a bit of pushback on there. I think the French regulators recently told them that they had to delete any information about French citizens. But again, as you said, most people don't understand that this is happening already.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. That's what we're trying to do in some way with our business, is educate people. Through our website, privacyparent.com, we do talk about a lot of these issues, a lot of the way they affect children, a lot of the way they're going to affect children's futures, and actually what is happening with them right now. And it's a very big concern. And, we right now have to take some responsibility for what we're creating for our children. And I don't think people are understanding that their indifference is being passed on to their children, and it's creating a lack of concern about privacy that could be very detrimental in the future.
I think we mentioned two great instances there. Another one that springs to mind is we're filling our homes with digital assistants and smart devices with always listening microphones, etc. And of course, that is in our phone as well. But are there any other unexpected threats that people listening might be unaware of that maybe they should be starting to pay more attention to this year?
The digital assistant is actually a large concern for me because they're so user-friendly. And I am a very pro-technology person. I think a lot of the advancements of technology, even with AI, are great and can be very beneficial. My concern is that we shouldn't be selling our souls, in a sense, losing all our privacy in order to engage with these things. And I don't think that they have to be privacy devoid in order to have these products exist. I think right now the focus has been so much on making money through these products as opposed to understanding the benefits and or the detriments of what these things might do. I personally would love us to be able to build a voice assistant. I'd like you to be able to, speak to your home and not worry that it's being recorded or analyzed or worrying about what temperature you keep your house at. And down the road, is the Google Home going to know that you like to keep your house too warm or too cold and say that you're not environmentally friendly? Are you going to get an environmental score from that? All these things, are potentially going to happen down the road. And the amount of information that's taken every day through these products is it's insane. And I'm in such disbelief that people even use them, but they do, and they're good. They're user friendly. People like to engage with them because of the way that they can get their information. But again, the passive listening and the recording and then the analyzation, that doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, 100% with you on that. It's almost, I think it's that trade between privacy and convenience. People have happily paid that price. If it makes my life easy, if it makes my life more convenient, I'll sacrifice my privacy without actually realizing it. But of course, if we look at the bigger scale here in Europe, we've got GDPR, and that has forced many businesses to up their game around privacy. And I know in the US, you've got the California Consumer Privacy Act. And as a result of some of those really big fines, a lot of businesses are starting to realize that data could go from being their biggest asset to their biggest liability. So if anyone in the audience is listening in the US, should they be hopeful that a data privacy law will be a priority for the federal government this year outside of California and beyond? And what do you think they should?
A couple of years ago, I wrote an article about GDPR regulations, and I called it The Right to Be Remembered, because I was really distraught about the right to be forgotten piece of the GDPR law. Yeah. I thought that was really misconstrued. The amount of hoops you have to jump through to actually have your data deleted through GDPR regulations is enormous. It's not just contacting Google, or it's not just contacting Apple, or it's contacting several hundred different groups that have collected your data. The right to be forgotten is almost non-existent. To me, and I actually posted something on LinkedIn. There was an article in Reuters in December that spoke about how Amazon was actively working against privacy laws in many states in America. And I feel that was probably the same case with GDPR regulations in the California and the Colorado regulations. I think they were built backwards. Quite honestly, if you had to jump through all the hoops to not be tracked that you do to be tracked, I think it would be different. If the law was built in reverse and it said that your data was not allowed to be collected unless you opted in, and then you had to check all those boxes to opt in as opposed to check all those boxes to opt out, I think that would have been a stronger privacy regulation. Quite honestly, I think that you shouldn't be allowed to collect or analyze data. Some businesses need to collect it. You're selling things and you need a record of those things. But like a newspaper website, understanding how long you've read an article or which articles you're reading individually, and then sending that data to be analyzed by AI, I don't think that should be legal. I think that most data collection and all AI analysis of data should be illegal. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I also don't think that you can totally protect yourself, because there will always be nefarious actors. There'll be North Korea, there'll be China, there'll be Russia, Iran, whomever it may be. They're not bound by our laws. And so there's no jurisdiction that can prevent them from doing these things. So you'll always need to protect yourself. It's a cat and mouse game at this point. So people are always going to need to protect themselves. Laws might do something and protect you internally in whatever country you might be in. But at this point, there is so much money being put into the lobbying legislation of privacy legislation. And the money that's behind it is the groups that are not interested in protecting your privacy. There isn't a strong enough citizenry group that is vocal enough to create really strong privacy laws. So I don't mean to be a downer, but I don't really foresee any real legislation that is going to protect people's privacy. And the laws that exist now, I don't feel have any real privacy constraints whatsoever.
Yeah, you've raised a brilliant point there, and it's highlighted some of my biggest frustrations with the web. For when you land on a website, it either says, we're not going to give you the content because it's too much hassle for us to do it, or you've got to click through 6 or 7 times on exactly what cookies you're going to share and what you're not going to share. And then by which time you've almost give up and you maybe hit the back button, and then you find they've disabled the back button as well. And you just end up, it almost holds you hostage, doesn't it?
You almost just concede because you don't want to jump through all those hoops. One of the benefits of our VPN and our browsers, we do block all the tracking cookies that come onto you, so you don't have to really engage with a lot of those things. But quite honestly, if the laws were built differently and you had to click those things to opt in and nothing was going to be collected if you didn't, that would have been a much stronger regulation. And if you think about it, that's what it should have been. And it wasn't crafted that way because there was a huge lobbying effort and money put towards not allowing people to have real privacy.
And we have talked a lot today about protecting ourselves and what we could be doing better. But I also read that the threat of data collection and what it poses to children is something that you're very passionate about too. And again, it's something that a lot of people listening will not have thought of. So can you tell me a little bit more about how children are being impacted by this generation of parents' habits right now? Because again, people don't think about it that much.
Certainly not enough. They are thinking about it a little bit, but not necessarily in the critical way I would hope. I wrote an article a couple of years ago in which I called this generation, all of us, digital guinea pigs. The advent of the smartphone is only 12 or 2010. And so we're in a really small window where we are all being experimented on. And there's even your Optimizely interview the other day, the gentleman was saying, you're learning about your customers, you're experimenting with different things and how to sell them. And it's all part of a social experiment. Social media was the same way. I say in my article, a lot of the ills that we're confronting today, social disparity, religious problems, economic disparity, whatever it might be, climate change, were problems that were created by generations in the past that we are now trying to clean up. But the problem that we're creating for a future generation that is solely the problem that we're creating right now is the loss of privacy. And we are not taking any steps to mitigate what the problems might be in the future. I often ask people if they understood about some of the problems with pollution and how it had affected the world. Would you have taken steps many years ago to try and mitigate those problems so we weren't in the place we were now? The answer is probably yes. But what we're doing right now to our children in privacy is the same disregard people have paid to many of the other problems we're facing right now. And we can't do that. It's going to be something that at some point, they're not going to be able to overcome. And if we don't start to take these things seriously, privacy is going to become a nostalgic concept. You and I are going to be sitting around a fireplace in 20 years, nostalgically talking about privacy. And that shouldn't be. Our kids should be able to have experience with privacy. It shouldn't be a concept that they've heard about.
So if you were to look into the future, what would your vision be for a privacy parent in let's say, 10 years?
I would hope the privacy parents were evolving now, because at some point we're going to hit a critical point where it's going to be too hard to get these kids back. The indifference that parents are showing to their children about privacy is having a large fallout effect. Again, your Optimizely gentleman made a comment about how Gen X is less concerned about what they're divulging. They still are, but Gen Z is even less, and baby boomers are more. But we have to start to show our kids what having privacy is, and taking steps to say to them that what they're doing right now is. I also wrote another article about your permanent record. When we were kids, you were always worried about everything. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble for this. It's going to be on my permanent record. Now everything is on your permanent record. And it's not just a permanent record that's held by a school or by some other institution. It's a permanent record that's being collected by hundreds, if not thousands of groups all over the world. And these are things that at this point, there are certain instances where children are being denied scholarships or whatever for a silly post that they might have put on TikTok or Instagram, but it could get even more invasive. Businesses are checking social media. People have to understand that what they're divulging about themselves have ramifications for the future, but it's not just for themselves. It's all of the data collection is going to be harmful to individuals down the road. And until we can get a hold of what that means and try and take steps to mitigate, we're on a slippery slope. And people really have to start taking this seriously. For me, this is more of a calling than a business. At this point, I don't really see many other groups out there really trying to save privacy. And I can't envision what the world would be like if you weren't even able to speak words without somebody listening, recording, and analyzing what you are saying. It sounds silly, but I truly feel that in 10 or 15 years, if you're not teaching your kids to write by hand, there'll be no way to communicate. Literally pen and paper, passing old school espionage notes. It's going to go back to weird languages that people don't understand that they make up so they can communicate in private. I mean, it will be doublespeak from Big Brother. I just think people should really be concerned about what the lack or the loss of privacy will mean to future generations. I often say that if we are very successful and people start to move off Earth, would you rather go to a privacy parent or an effortless privacy planet where you're going to have your privacy protected, or would you rather go to an Amazon or a Google planet where they'll know everything about you and there'll be no privacy whatsoever? So I just hope people can take away from our discussion here that privacy is something they should start thinking about, start being concerned about. Use a VPN, use my private browser. It's just essential that people start to take this seriously. What it means to them, a lot of people say, oh, I've already been on the internet so long, I don't have so much, I've already divulged everything. But it's not about you. It's about what you're doing by allowing you, every click, every move you make, you're enriching these big tech companies. And we've got to stop giving them the fuel to destroy our privacy. So people really start to have to take this seriously.
Food for thought indeed. I'm sure everyone listening will have a lot of questions around this, so I invite them to email me and we'll keep this conversation going. But before I let you go, we have talked about a serious topic today. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with you. A question I always like to finish with my guests is ask them what song has inspired them in the past, helped them in their career, helps them get their head in the zone, or just reminds them of their career in tech. Is there a song or anything that springs to mind?
My children would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that I'm a huge Beatles and Clash fan. So quite honestly, some of the Clash songs like Clamp Down, Lost in the Supermarket, Police and Thieves, I thought those things get me motivated to fight the fight that I'm fighting. And some of the creepier songs that make me think about what is actually going on are Rockwell's Somebody's Watching Me. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, yeah, I remember that one.
And also Sting's Every Breath You Take, two of the creepier stalking songs. Those two make me think that if people could just listen to those and think about what that means to privacy in the future, yeah, they're just eye-opening in very many ways. But yes, my main passion is rock and roll, and the Clash does get me motivated in the morning to make sure that I'm fighting the good.
Love that. Isn't it funny, those two tracks you mentioned there, there's the Sting one and Rockwell. Back in the 80s, they didn't seem to be creepy, did they, in any way? It's only when you hear the lyrics now, you think, whoa, that is very creepy.
Especially the Sting song, it was a love song, people.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a stalker song. This isn't a love song. No, I appreciate these questions at the end. I've listened to several of your podcasts, and I always enjoy your interviewees' comments about music because a lot of them have extensive knowledge, and it's always fun to listen, and you do as well.
Thank you so much. And for anyone listening who wants to find out more information about Datacappy, anything we've talked about, or connect and contact a member of your team, what's the best start?
The best way to contact us is either through our Datacappy website. We have an email messaging platform. I'm on LinkedIn, Marco Bellin on LinkedIn. And also Privacy Parent, I think, is the greatest resource around. And I would hope people would be able to engage that, read some of our articles, get some insight into what's going on, because that's really where all the information is coming out.
Thank you so much for joining me today. There's so much I've learned from chatting with you, but also I think we've only scratched the surface. I think we could have easily chatted another hour about personalization and when it gets creepy, privacy versus convenience, and also how in many circles you've almost expected to feel bad about having a VPN, and only people that use a VPN are people that have got things to hide. Don't know where that came from. That's a very worrying trend. So I think we should get you back on a little bit later on in the year and maybe cover some of those topics too. It'd be great to stay in touch and keep this conversation going. But thanks for joining me today.
I'd really appreciate that. That would be great, because I do think this is a topic that people should be aware about, and the more conversation that can be had around it, the more awareness will be created. So I really appreciate your attention to it.
Wow, we covered so much there. And as I said a few moments ago, we only scratched the surface. And I didn't mean what I said. I will be inviting Marco back on later in the year. Maybe it's a good opportunity as well for all of us to think about how we have sacrificed privacy for convenience over the years. And is that something we're still cool with? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If you are or are not cool with it, I want to hear both sides of the argument, so please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you'd like to work with me. Keep those messages coming in, keep your questions coming in, and if you want to come on the podcast, there's an open invite for you too. But that's it for today, so I will meet you all here, same time, same place tomorrow, but thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.